This is a podcast from Rover.
Welcome to Parents We've Met, where we chat about the mess and magic of parenting. Today on the couch, we are very lucky to have Jo Robertson back. She is a therapist, educator, and researcher, and her episode last season was our #1 rating chat. So if you haven't listened to it already, it is so worth going back to check it out. Also, right at the beginning, best to drop in a bit of a disclaimer that this is a chat for adults, so best to listen when little ears are not around. Welcome back, Jo.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I really did love our chat last season. There was so much wisdom and so much great feedback as well.
Oh, good.
So it's awesome to have you back. I'm curious though, have you had any more boating adventures since we saw you last?
Well, actually, we had 2 adventures this year, one which we call a land holiday, and then the other was a boat holiday. But I think it's important to say that any time you go away with kids, it's not a holiday, it's a trip.
Yeah, true.
And that's a really good reframe around
Yeah.
expectations. So we spent a month in Sri Lanka, which was out of control amazing. And then we spent a month in French Polynesia on a boat. And that was actually a lot more challenging, but what we call great moments.
Great moments. Because you did mention last season that you and your husband, you sort of do more like high risk parenting. Like you take a bit more extreme, you do these big adventures.
Yeah, we like to really immerse ourselves in an experience, and of high value to us is cross-cultural experiences. So really, whenever we're in a place, we want to really understand what it's like to live there, to be local. And so in Sri Lanka, we rented a tuk-tuk for the whole time and just, spent some time really going into the back streets of a town and seeing who lives there as opposed to who's on the main strip. It can be really, really different. And so we just loved it. It was such a great country. Like, I cannot encourage people enough to go there.
What an adventure. I love how you've framed it around it being trips, because I think our expectations can be really let down when we think it's going to be a holiday.
Yes.
That adventure is awesome, but you've also had another adventure where you were a coach for Married at First Sight.
I did.
How was that for you?
Yeah, I think pulling the 2 bits apart. So the first was the filming, and then 5 months later it aired.
Oh.
So potentially, I don't know when we last talked, but potentially I was in the midst of filming and or had already done it, but it was this like top secret thing. And then, so those were 2 really different experiences. Filming it, really fun, loved it. John and I had a great relationship and we just laughed our way through the whole thing. And I really loved getting to know the couples, everybody on there, good chats about relationship dynamics. Then when it aired, I had what I think every person on TV must feel at some point was this constant roller coaster of anxiety and emotions. And so it aired Sunday through Tuesday or Sunday through Wednesday. So Saturday night, my anxiety kicked up and then it just sat there the whole time until the Wednesday. And then I'd go, it's okay. It's okay.
Breathe.
Yeah. And I mean, it was a really enlightening experience and I developed a really deep empathy for anybody who's more in the public eye. You feel more hypervigilant of yourself and how you're coming across. You feel like people are making assessments of you all the time, whether they are or not. It's the feeling that's there. So both those were really different, but part of the same show.
So a degree of powerlessness?
You're completely powerless, yes.
You have no say in the edit?
I would say afterwards, I could say, hey, guys, I don't think that was great. Maybe because what I said I didn't nail and I wouldn't want anyone to misinterpret it. So I could say things like that, but ultimately their decision, if they felt like it was important. And you have to put a lot of trust in that. So they would say, no, we feel like this is an important piece. And it was really relevant to what the couple was going through. And you have to go, okay, cool.
So Jo, would you do it again?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think it pulls in 2 of my passions, which is one, working with couples and being this therapist person in people's lives. And then the other is being in the community, speaking, sharing, doing, what we might call mass education. So when I'm with a couple, I only get to work with them, right? I've only got 2 people or 1 person in front of me. I can try and change what's happening for them. But when you're on a public platform, everybody who's watching can get some nuggets. And so I saw it like that the whole time. I always thought the couple's in front of me, and then the audience is there, and they're watching, listening, assessing what I say, and I want them to go away from an episode, at least from me, having maybe learnt something or, start questioning themselves a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's a great way for us to learn because I think we naturally like to see other people's struggles. We like to see that other people are in pain and suffering sometimes. And then...
You really saw that on the show.
Yeah. And then we can harvest some ideas for ourselves and kind of do it with our dignity intact or
yes,
without being under the limelight ourselves. So...
Yeah, and I thought... I am a therapist in New Zealand and obviously John is in Australia. So one of my hopes was that people would see the show and go, oh, she's kind of normal. And not that meant they would reach out to me, but it would be okay to reach out to someone and I could access help and, they wouldn't be super quirky or strange, that would feel safe.
Yeah.
And so that was my hope as well, was to present this kind of safe therapist persona that people would then go, oh, that kind of help is slightly more accessible.
So good.
Love it.
We also chatted last time about your Making Sense campaign. You were collecting signatures and you're about to go to Parliament, I think, at that point. How's that progressed? Where's that at now?
Yeah, so it's at a crunchy time where we've just presented so petitions are crazy beasts, and there's like all the stuff you learn as you do it that you don't know before. So you've got 3 types of presentations involved. You've got your first where you hand it over physically, like give it to an MP. Your second, which is a written submission, so that's a big document on all your whats and whys and how to create change. And then you've got an oral submission, which is in front of a group it's a select committee, so it's a cross-party group, and you go and you give a speech essentially, and they get the chance to ask questions. So Holly and I went down and we did that, and then they ask other people to present as well. So the Department of Internal Affairs and the Classifications Office, and then a body who represents internet service providers, they all presented. And you can't butt in. So you just everyone is allowed their piece and everyone gets some questions, and then what the select committee does is they go away, they assess all of that, and then they come back with their recommended suggestions, and so we're waiting for that.
That's big. If people want to find out more and hear what actually happens, where's the best place to go?
So we try and keep our Instagram updated, which is Makes Sense Aotearoa, and then our website, which is makesense.org.nz. Some of the other projects that we've dove into is in filtering in schools. So we stumbled into this space of realizing how much content was available on student devices when logged in. And so we were quite shocked by that and did some media, but also engaged with Ministry of Education, and they have been responsive to creating change. So that's been cool. And then we're also got a campaign at the moment around delaying devices for children and intermediate age kids. Trying to do what we call hold the phone. So hold the phone back.
Hold the phone.
Yeah.
As a parent of 2 kids, thank you, Jo.
I want to thank Jo too. Jo and Holly or whoever else is in this team, because we just see parents come in for coaching and they are behind what's going on, and there's real angst and trouble at home and kids who are just kind of losing even the ability to play and do things because there's so much time on a device. And I'm just really thankful that parents are going to have something that gives them a backstop and a bit of support and sort of wakes them up a little bit too. We need a bit of waking up.
Yeah.
Holly has a child going to high school next year, and I've got a child going to intermediate. And it felt like this really important point where in both of our lives, in both of our kids' lives, where we were seeing all these parents starting to hand out phones and for, Christmas and or end of year celebration going into the next school year. And I just thought, I can't just sit back knowing what phones really represent for kids in terms of what they'll be able to see and engage with. So I just felt this immediate, like we have to intervene as fast as possible.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of season 2. We've only got a few more episodes to go. And I've really noticed a theme this season of relationships. I mean, we always talk about relationships, but it's felt quite heavy. Relationships with your parents, friends, partner, and even with yourself. So we thought it would be great to get your insights into some of these changes and ideas for protecting relationships while in the thick of parenting. So today we've got questions from ourselves, but also we put it out to podcast listeners that they could share their questions as well. So we should get into it because I could just talk about all sorts all day.
Yeah, first up, number 1, what do you think are essential ingredients or requirements for a relationship to work?
Okay, so the 3 T's, talk, time, and touch, and basically relate to parenting as well. But quality talking, which means how are you going, more beyond what's happening for the kids at school, how are you feeling about your parenting? Like how are we doing in our life? What are our dreams? How are we going to work towards those? Really quality conversations around money and budgeting, which are extremely difficult. And then reflective questions around intimacy. What's going super well? What would we like to do better in the future? What does a great 2025 look like? At the end of 2025, where would we like to be? So setting some goals, really strength focused. And then your time, quality time without phones. Put down the phone. And I just see couples honestly disrupted by phones constantly. And it creates resentment. It creates actual emotional pain. Because if you're having a conversation with someone, and if like this happened right now, and one of you to just pick up your phone, you've left the conversation. And I instantly feel unseen, unheard, not pursued. Like I'm not important. Whatever's happening on the device is more important. So put the phone down.
Yeah.
Watch a movie, watch TV. Like I'm not telling you to go out and get babysitters. It's too expensive. 99% of us just have to stay at home. And so for our date nights. And so just put the phone down and do whatever makes you feel happy. And then the last one is touch. There's intimacy in terms of sexual intimacy. But what I really mean there is non-sexual touch. So the holding hands in the car, the little back scratches, the kissing on the head, the putting your hand on someone's back as you walk past them in the kitchen, all of that stuff separates you from being flatmates. So you instantly transform your relationship. It's what I call changing the culture, which is that the culture is one of care and intentionality. I know that this person wants me because they show me attention. They kind of really turn up. And I mean, you can change the culture within 10 minutes at home by little tiny increments of 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Your whole relationship dynamic shifts when the person feels loved. And so I just tell people this all the time. Honestly, just start touching each other. Give each other a big hug in the morning. Give each other an actual kiss at one point and let your kids see it. Like really let your kids see that. And maybe they'll squirm a little bit. Who cares? It's so good for them in the long term.
Yeah.
They learn how to do relationship. I mean, things like this sounds really dumb, but manners. We stop in relationships using our manners. Pass me the salt. We've stopped from the beginning of our relationship. We would say, can you please pass me the salt? That is the culture of your relationship. Demands, entitlement, and we want to shift it into love and care. So small little increments make up, that's life-changing.
Yeah, so good.
It is so good.
I suppose, you're talking about communication, checking in. We've got this question. I feel like we need a WOF for our marriage, maybe every 6 months to a year to really check in, see where we may need a tune-up. Would love any ideas for questions we could put each other to get the conversation going, and maybe different areas that we should check in. But I suppose that's sort of what you said, the touch. I'm trying to remember the taste now.
It's already gone.
Talk. Touch, and there was time.
Good.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Your relationship is safe now.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to shift that a little bit. And what I would encourage people to do is actually start their own reflection first. So before jumping into, telling the other person what maybe they could work on or what went well and what didn't, maybe do that on your own time about yourself and then bring it to your partner and see what they say. So Dave, my husband, did this thing off his own bat. I was deeply impressed, like really, really shocked and impressed. He said, I want to go away and I want to do some journaling. He's never done that before. So this is a new thing. And he said, I want to spend a few hours thinking about every part of my life and kind of what's going on in each one. And so he did what he called a 360, and he thought about our relationship, all the parts, so intimacy, also how we were parenting, all the things. And then he came back and he told me what his reflections were. And I, felt really grateful because he wasn't waiting for me to raise anything. He was bringing it to me. I felt so thankful he was being vulnerable in terms of saying what he thinks he doesn't do so well. And I actually didn't need to jump in with anything at all because he knew. He'd intuitively picked up where I was struggling with him and then said, this is how I want to do it differently. So that sounds to lots of people like, maybe your husband or your partner would never do that. But I hear to say he'd never done that. And I learned from him in that moment. So I don't need to say, hey, please do this better. He was willing to do it himself.
I love that, doing your own homework first. Yeah. And what an offering of love. That brings you closer because someone has actually thought about the stuff that they can do. So it doesn't feel like a heavy weighted conversation because often they are, well, you're doing this wrong and I wish you'd do more of that. And they always have a sort of a slight tension to them of inadequacy and not doing enough, because often one person is doing more than another person in a relationship. So love that one.
Love languages came up quite a bit. And I know that you have a love-hate relationship with them, maybe because people don't acknowledge how much they move and shift. So what should be on our radar when it comes to them? And some people probably love them and use them and find it helpful. And some people are like, next thing. And that's all good.
This is what this looks like in my life. I have couples that come to me all the time, and this is a stereotype, but this is what it looks like. So they come, let's say it's a heterosexual couple, and just as a stereotype, but this is often what it is, that the female says, I don't really want sex as much as he does. And then he says to me, touch is my love language. It's just what I need. I honestly want to leave the room. I hate it so much. Because what it does is it kind of brings about this sense of like, you need to give me what I need, which means that you need to give me your body. And that is the experience often of that female partner, is they feel like a demand is being made of them, but it's slightly manipulative because it's like, oh, this is what I need. And it's a love language. I'm not in control of it. And it's just so infuriating and hurtful. It's hurtful. And then this is what happens a lot, is that she says, well, my love language is acts of service. So I'd really like it if you helped me cook dinner, or if you helped me with the kids, or did more laundry. And again, as well, I just want to leave the room, because she's saying that because she's not getting the help that she needs. That's what's happening there. And then I always say this, before you were in this relationship, or even before you had children, what would you say your love languages were? And they're like, oh, yeah, no, I used to be quality time. Or he'll often say, I used to be acts of service and now it's changed. I'm like, what? Like, why has that happened? And then they go, because we don't get it anymore. And that is what's happening, is they're actually expressing what they would like to change. Let's remove the love language from the room, because they're saying, hey, this is what I'm struggling with and I'd really like your help with it, which is a totally different position to, I have a need, please fill it. And so I always encourage people to reframe in their conversations. And this is the muscle that needs to be built, is how do you frame a question or a challenge even in a way that it feels safe for the other person. So I always say, okay, what would it be like if he said to you, I love being with you. I love your body. I think you're so sexy. I love having sex with you. It just always makes me so happy. Everything about you when we're having sex just brings me so much joy. So I'd love to have it more. That is a different conversation to, this is my need and please fill it. Yeah. And so this is how I want people to start talking to each other. This is the culture of the relationship, is pursuing the other person. Essentially saying, like, this is what I love about you. This is what I want to do with you and how much I care for you. And let's figure out a solution together, which often means negotiating. It doesn't mean one person gets what they want. It means both people give and take.
Love it.
That's my love language
Yeah.
gripe.
No, it's good. It's
So
really good.
some people use it, and like I'm with them. It's a helpful language, but it moves and shifts, and it's not about entitlement.
We had this question around struggling with libido and just being on different planets almost, and that comes through a lot. So what do you say to people that are like, it's just becomes like another task and I just would rather watch Netflix and hang out and not have that pressure?
Yeah. There's a few things going on in that question. So the first is around the difference in libidos. Every couple has a difference in libido. So let's normalize that straight away. If one partner wants it more than the other, you're normal. There's nothing dysfunctional happening there. There's nothing strange. There's nothing broken. Normal and common. So don't feel like you're broken, which I guess that's what I really want people to know. Also, what we tend to do as a society is we tend to celebrate the person who has a higher libido and shame the person who has the lower one. And ultimately that person feels like they're the broken one. And how problematic is that? Because what we're really doing there is you need to raise up. They're in a good spot, you're not. Sort it out. And that's not okay. This is the negotiating piece. Both are in the right because they just have a hope there around what they want. And so we have to negotiate. So that's the second layer of what's happening. The third is that you often feel more tired from watching TV and doing sedentary tasks. So that makes sense that you also have this kind of craving to just lay. I actually saw this counselor once and they said, oh, what do you do? I was struggling with some previous trauma stuff. And they said, what do you do to make your body feel good? And I said, lie down. And then they said, oh, okay, no, but what about in nature? And I said, no. I just want to go to bed.
Lie down in nature.
Yeah. And then they said, what about a bath or a shower? I said, I hate showers because I have to stand. I just want to lay down. And she said that, could you lie in the grass? And then I said, I have hay fever. So I'm going to lie on the concrete if you would like me to. So anyway, I'm not great at all the, self-care stuff that often people in my position tell us to do. But the sitting on your phone actually is taking energy away from you. Watching TV is often taking energy away from you. And it's also addictive. So it's sending lots of messages to your body. Keep doing this. Stay in the story. Everything else, ignore. Last night I was watching Dawson's Creek. Couldn't stop. Just couldn't. I love it. Joey, Pacey, the whole thing. I'm deep. You're in the story.
Going old school.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the third time I've watched it. I love it so much. So, it was amazing. I was exhausted, so exhausted. I couldn't stop. And that's what happens when we do often sedentary tasks that involve devices. I find that when people go out, they do a bit of exercise, even if it's 10 minutes, they feel energized. They often feel really kind of good about themselves. They often feel better about their relationship and more likely to engage in a healthy way. So that's the next kind of bit that's going on there. And then the last one is that you've got to talk about it with each other around what you want. You've got to, okay, what's your dream? Twice a day. Okay. What's your dream? Once a month. All right. So we're in different planets. Yes. So what are we going to do? How are we going to navigate that? And when is it that you actually feel your libido rise a bit more? And often, this is what women will say to me, I really only feel like sex once a month. And then I'll say, okay, well, when is that? And they're like, I think it's when I'm ovulating. Yep. Because there's a hormonal thing happening in your body which is pushing you towards sex. So if you don't feel like the rest of the time, that totally makes sense. In fact, there's times in your monthly cycle where it's pushing your libido down. And so you're not in control of that. We also don't blame or shame you. That's totally normal and healthy. It tells us your body is working well. I'm giving you a long answer, sorry, but there's so many layers in that question, so I'm just hitting them all. And okay, so how are we going to do this? When you're in a hot zone, you're good. But when you're in a cooler zone, how are we going to do intimacy? probably needs to take more time because you're not naturally as aroused. Probably needs to involve more foreplay, might need to involve more quality time. You might need to introduce a toy or something that kind of brings about arousal more quickly. Let's get practical. Like, what's going to be helpful to try and pull you guys together? Because we've got twice a day and once a month, and neither of those things are probably going to work. So let's make a plan.
It's so funny, like when you say toy, I just think of Furbies and like all the good stuff.
Could be.
That's where my head frame is at the moment. I'm like thinking the parenting. Jenny, next question.
I'll bring you a toy next time.
I'm
not a Furby.
Yeah. Turning a corner here. As a coach, I'm getting lots of families who are either blended or thinking about it, and there's all sorts of issues that rise with this one. So what would you say to families? There'll be lots of layers for this, but
yes.
Jo, what would you say to families who are thinking about blending?
Okay. First up, please just go really slow. Don't introduce a new partner until you're really committed to that relationship and you know it's long term. It is only going to be damaging to your children to introduce lots of people to them. I have to say this to my separated couples all the time. You also need to make a plan with each other as the separated couple about when you both feel comfortable incorporating a new partner. So ideally, you want to agree on a time frame to show deep respect for the other person, no matter how much you dislike them, because you still have to parent alongside them. So it's great if you can make a plan and go really slow. What I say is really new partners probably shouldn't be introduced within 6 months. So 6 months, you've got a sense of the relationship, you've got a sense if it's going longer, you're out of a bit of a honeymoon and you're deeper into some conflict or some tension, great. And you're wanting to pursue the relationship, no matter the tension and conflict. So that's my first kind of point there. The second one is when it comes to your kids, no matter what age, they probably have some feelings. And often what we do with our kids' feelings, and I fall into this trap a lot as well, is that we try and fix them. We try and make those feelings go away because they make us uncomfortable, as opposed to just sitting with them. If Jenny, you were to tell me something now about something you're feeling, and I was to go, oh, but the silver lining is blah, blah, blah. Or, oh, remember, like, we're going to be able to go to the arcade, or we're going to be able to have family Christmas, or we're going to be able to do this. They don't feel good at that point because they feel ignored. And they feel like we're just we're really minimizing what's going on for them. So I have, for example, just a real life story. I have 2 kids who really struggle with each other. Their personalities are really different. Arguably, they don't like each other 99% of the time. What I'm tempted to do is try and fix that for them. Oh, let's look at all the things that we like. Let's think about all the strengths of them. What's good about having brothers, No. They just feel minimized. What I can say is, yeah, they're annoying sometimes. You don't have to like them. That's totally fine. I get it. Probably if my sibling did that to me, I'd find them really annoying as well. Empathize. We don't need a fix. And then the second conversation with your child or young adult or teenager might be the processing one. So the first one is just empathy. Then the second conversation is processing. What can we do differently? How can we help? What's some of our reframing? What are some of the values that this person, values around having this person in our family, but not in the first conversation.
Yeah. So good. Here's a question. My wife and I have recently separated. I'm trying to keep the peace for the kids, but it's hard. Any tips on how to do this as best as we can?
Yeah. Where I see this going wrong, or potentially couples having more conflict, so the peace being unsettled, is where they try and deal with their relationship issues once they're already separated. So this person is already separated. This is not the time to go into past conflict, past differences. The moment has come and gone. You're not trying to fix the romantic relationship anymore. If you're trying to process things, you do that in your own therapy or with your own friends and family, your own support people. Don't go to that person and, bring some wound from the past. It's finished. So they're not your processing person anymore, and you're potentially going to have things that you never resolve. The relationship with that person is now solely co-parenting. It's not support. It's not conflict resolution. It's just parenting. So I encourage people to stop talking about their relationship. Just stop.
Yep.
They often need to go through a season of talking much less than they did. So it doesn't mean that you never speak, because you often still have stuff to deal with around your co-parenting. There's an app called the Our Family Wizard, and that is really helpful for communicating about the needs of the family, but not having to talk directly. Now, it is good for your kids to see you say hi, how are you going, and bye. Just fake it. Just pretend that stuff. You don't you don't need to come from an authentic place in this time of your life. You need to get through, and your kids need to just see you be kind. That's all. And so talk less, be really selective about what you talk about, and you're going to do some pretending, and that's okay.
You have said that betrayal is so rarely about sex and so often about looking for affirmation, escape, distraction, and connection. So how do we protect our relationships and know where they could be vulnerable?
Often people betray out of what we call their inner child. So a wound that was established very early on in life, think birth through to 15. A wound that was really, really painful. You felt rejected. You felt minimized. Your voice was not allowed to be present. You weren't allowed to have needs. You were told to man up, sort it out, not have emotions. So lots of really hurtful things that often as adults we go, oh, that was just mum and dad, or oh, that's just how it was then. But actually it's created what we call an inner child wound. And people act out of their inner child all the time. So there's this process that we call do, think, feel, need. Do is the behavior. What do you do that's unhealthy or problematic? Then underneath a behavior, all of us have a thought. They don't like me. They're going to reject me. I'm not good enough. Whatever it is. Underneath the thought, always a feeling. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being out of control, fear of even having too much control. So that's fear of responsibility. There's always a feeling. And underneath that is a need. And you are, I think, vulnerable to betrayal or unhealthy behaviors until you identify the need that you often have and learn how to address it in a healthy way. So the best thing when I get excited about in relationships, they say things like, as a kid, I learned that my emotions were not welcome because mum and dad were real busy. Or mum and mum, or whoever it was, my auntie had, looked after me and she was constantly busy. So I learned that I had to suck it up. I learned that I had to, be quiet and just get shit done. And there's some strengths that did, but it also didn't serve you and created often a wound. So when they can say, this is what I learned as a child, and that means that when I have some feelings now, I tell them to go away. And so they identify what's the unhealthy habit that they have now, and then how do I need to work through that? What's helpful is if my partner, Sally, John, Dave, whatever, they say to me every time we're in conflict, I really love you. So we have this idea that we need to be so independent that other people shouldn't meet our needs. It's just such a myth. It's a total lie. Other people need to help us with our needs. And partners that flourish, they know each other's needs and they help them. So betrayal often from an inner child wound. And the best way to be preventative is to know that wound and know how to address it.
Everyone's got some homework.
Yeah, there's a lot of books on your inner child. I encourage couples or individuals, I always say, when you think about your childhood, what age do you feel? Like what age do you instantly go to? And I go to 8. And so then I go, okay, what was happening for 8-year-old Joe then? Because often that's a really critical point. Like whatever you imagine, that's a critical age, that something was going on for you, and that's a good beginning point.
We had this question. I fear because of our lack of intimacy right now, my husband will turn to porn. It happened after my firstborn, and I'm nervous it will happen again now the second has arrived. It feels like a betrayal, even though it's not technically cheating.
I want to hit that second part first. It feels like a betrayal, even though it's not technically cheating. There are lots of different types of betrayals. And a betrayal in and of itself is something that you do that you know is going to harm the other person. So it's going to be hurtful for them and you do it anyway. That is a betrayal. So it can be financial. spending money that you know that is going to hurt the other person, like gambling, for example, or investing without the consent of the other person. It can be sexual. It can be emotional in that something you talked about, which is deeply private, maybe mental illness, maybe something your child is going through, got shared with a colleague at work. That is a betrayal. And so I hear this from usually women a lot. They minimize the pain that they're feeling because it's not technically cheating. And I just would throw that idea out straight away and that's why I use the word betrayal instead of cheating. The pain is deep. And there is no hierarchy in that. I've had couples for whom the holding of someone else's hand comes across, at least in the counselling room, as more wounding than when somebody has gone and had sex with someone else, because it's the intimacy of it. And or porn can be another one. You know, if you're somebody, for example, who has self-esteem issues around your body, your partner goes and looks at porn, that's going to be deeply painful because it taps into that often in a child wound or something that you were told really early on that you're still navigating. So this minimizing, I'm just not here for. You know, let's put that away. It's painful and that's what matters. The next part, you know, the worry about them going to porn after baby number 2 absolutely makes sense. I think that if that is what happens, or if you're really worried about it, you actually need some help. You need some professional help. Because if somebody is feeling their behavior is out of control, like it might not be that their porn use is every day or for an hour a day or something like that. It means that they know that they're hurting their partner and they're doing it anyway. That's a form of being out of control. Then they usually need extra help. They often need more than a best friend. So they need somebody who understands the trigger that's taken them to that place and teaches them some healthy strategies for how to manage that. There's lots of online courses, but a one-on-one is most helpful.
You've got 3 courses that have come out recently. There is Better Sex for Couples, Postpartum Sex, and Painful Sex. Who are these courses for, and what sort of things do you cover?
So with our painful sex, that's kind of pretty obvious. If you're having painful sex, that's for you. Really, all of these courses are designed for committed couples. So that's who I had in mind the whole time, is like a couple who has been navigating sexual pain, whether it's 6 months or 20 years, and they want each other to understand what's going on for the other person. They want to know what steps to take next, what's being helpful, unhelpful, what professionals they're going to need. It's really, really practical. Postpartum, same. Right. So I consider postpartum up to 2 years after you've had a baby. And so it's for any couples who have got a child. It could be your first, second, third, fifth, that's within 2 years, and actually sometimes beyond that, but patterns were established in those really early years that didn't get broken. And that is all about hormones. It's all about change of roles, identity, self-esteem, that body image. It's all about how to reintegrate touch. What do you do when you're co-sleeping? You know, again, very practical, but for our couples who are just finding that season hard, as we all have. And I had myself in mind. I think this is important for people to know, is that, you know, I'm a sex therapist, but that doesn't mean that was all smooth sailing for me. I'm just really normal. Like, we're a really regular couple who also struggled postpartum, who I really was challenged when Dave was going off to work and I was at home with a baby, when I'm an ambitious person. That's hard stuff. And so I'm just really normal, and everything that I'm sharing, I will have experienced myself. And then the couples course, so the Better Sex for Couples, totally designed for committed couples. So not for people in casual relationships, people who are doing some years together, whether that's year 4 or year 30, that maybe some patterns have been established early on, changes in libido, one person wants to introduce certain sexual things, the other person doesn't, or hormones still play a role, what happens when erections aren't working, or we're in perimenopause, that kind of stuff. And I really wanted this to feel really safe. So there's lots of sex courses out there on the internet, right? And lots of them they're like a bit kinky. And they've probably got lots of really safe stuff in them. But I know for lots of my couples who come and see me, it feels too far. Like those courses often feel like, we've got to do those when we're at an 8 out of 10. I wanted these courses to feel like couples could do them when they're at a 2. Like they're at a 2 out of 10, they're barely holding hands sometimes. And so it's a big step to go to the kinky sex course. Like there's too much. So this is sometimes I call it like sex for normal people. They don't want to introduce a whip, but they do want to just have sex more often or have more pleasure. That's who it's designed for.
Okay, how do you help parents who have very different beliefs around how children should be raised and parented? I see this a lot, and I often get the feeling I don't even think you discussed what you believed and what you hoped for and what you dreamed for as you become parents. And so it's a little bit of a surprise and a real wake-up time when you realize, wow, we have very different ways of doing things. And people just say, oh, look, we're not parenting on the same page. I hear that a lot.
Yeah. I always encourage those people to come see you, Jenny.
That's why there's so many of like Jenny.
Yeah, it's true. That's what I say. I do. I go, you need to get a third party.
Yeah.
You need to get a mediating voice because this is big stuff and hard to manage. Religion, culture, how you do devices, how you deal with emotions with your kids. It's hard. So I always encourage a third party. And I think that's where the parenting place and the parent coaches, they just hit a real sweet spot there.
Cool. Thank you. The best parenting advice, Jo, that you've had?
There's 2 bits come to mind. Sorry, just taking it a bit far and going with 2.
Love 2.
So the first one is that the first intervention for any behaviour is time. And what I take that to mean is that if you've got a kid who's a bit tricky, then often our first intervention is like behaviour management, but the first intervention should be quality time. And that might be 5 minutes. It's not big, grand gestures.
The time one is profound because last week some parent came to me and they had a list of things that were going wrong. And they said, but, we have started doing something that we just thought, let's start before we go and see a coach. And it was just down to time. And they had scheduled in two mum and dad, very busy, very engaged, but this little person, a little 7-year-old, just wanted time. And so they scheduled in some time, I think put it on the calendar, said we're going to have some time together. I think they just had a movie night, fish and chips and a movie night. The behaviour changed and it was a tank. It was sort of an emotional need. I want to be seen. I want to spend some time with my parents. And the behaviour they were looking for strategies for, kind of it no longer seemed relevant to go into too many strategies.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually that fits right into my second one, which is about good enough parenting. And that you don't have to do all the things all the time. You don't have to be on international holidays. Like I'm someone who obviously does that, but that's not what kids need. That's an optional extra. That's a lovely bonus, but it's not the essential. The essential is that time. And, turn up to assembly every once in a while, but you don't have to go every week because that might be too hard, but just schedule it in every once in a while. You don't have to play with them on the trampoline for hours. It might be that you ask them to help you cut the carrots. So not kind of pushing yourself beyond what's your actual capacity, whether that's financial or literal time capacity, but just integrating those little bits of connection where you can.
There is so much good advice in there. Thank you so much, Jo. It is 2025. It's a new year. And I think it's still, a great time in these first few months to be making changes and to thinking about how we want to do this year. So any last advice for our listeners?
Yeah. So what we do, Dave and I, when it comes to a new year or actually a new season, is we plan around not who trumps everything, but who gets a little bit more of the limelight. So we have usually a 5-year season each, and we've always done this. So we go, okay, your stuff, you want to really grow it. You're going to come first, or when it's, when we're in a tricky spot, your work's going to take priority. And I've had priority for a number of years now. Dave's really encouraged my growth. He's worked part-time. I've done my master's. I did the TV, all of that stuff. And he's had to take a major step back from his career, and he's had to be at home as the primary caregiver. And now we're transitioning. So 2025 and for the next few years, he'll get some more of the light. I will still sparkle bright, but he will sparkle potentially a little bit more. And I think that's really healthy because it's really hard for both to shine just as bright next to each other the whole time.
That's great. I've never thought of that. All right, Callum, who's sparkling this year? We're going to find out tonight.
Yeah, because somebody has to be at home when the kids are sick, right? So you have to decide who is really going to lean into that more. And so now we go into a season where I'll lean in a little bit more because he's done a lot of days off with the kids.
You know, Jo, you've kind of reminded us there are a lot of things to talk about, and I think people are going to gather that there's some things that they just haven't fronted up with that are really good conversations to have, like, how's this year going to work and who is going to sparkle and who is going to carry a different load again. And I think the encouragement for parents that I'm taking for myself is don't stop talking about these things.
Yeah, great.
They're really important.
If we can help at all on your parenting journey, whether it's through coaching, courses or helpful articles, head to parentingplace.nz. Also, to find out more about Jo and the support she offers, head to jorobertson.org.
Rover. Music, radio, podcasts.